What problems are you dealing with in your life right now?
Do you feel like giving up? Times are hard and you're not strong. Well, I know the answer for you, and it will lead to real truth. Don't look back to yesterday.
Now there are answers.
Tomorrow's on the
Welcome to Live Prayer.
It's waiting there.
And welcome to Live Prayer. I'm Bill Keller. Good to be with you on this Thursday night. I pray that you had a wonderful day today. Good to be back with you. And we've got a lot going on tonight. If you were with us last night, you remember me maybe in the beginning talking about how I'm kind of trying to clear everything out so I can just really focus on one issue tonight. Well, the best laid plans of mice and men, as they say. We've got a lot to get to tonight. I do want to spend a little bit of time on Christians learning lessons from the rise of Donald Trump in the political world. Some really interesting parallels there, some lessons I think we can learn. And I'm talking now not about going into politics. I'm talking about lessons we can learn in how we can be more effective serving the Lord. That's where I'm going with this. But we've got a lot of other things to talk about tonight. It's going to be one of those nights I think I'm going to hit you with a lot of stuff tonight. So we're going to pray in a second. Keep your mind open. I love the emails I get from people talking about how they take notes like a class during the program. God bless you. I'll try to be a good teacher. But I've got a lot of things tonight that I believe I'm pretty certain a lot of these are going to be coming back again. But it may just be an introduction tonight. There's some things here that are going to be updates on things we've already talked about. Some issues I'm going to, put on the table, and I have little doubt that we're going to be coming back to them at a later date. But, listen, wherever you're at tonight, I appreciate you tuning in. Of course, I'm Bill Keller, founder of liveprayer.com, world's largest interactive Christian website. Reach a little over 2.5 million folks every day via the internet. I would encourage you to check us out online, web address on your screen, liveprayer.com. Incredible amount of content, 20 years, totally unique. I can promise you that. And I've never had anybody email me or get hold of me and say, well, you really weren't, you weren't honest about that. Trust me, this is all unique content to Live Prayer. Very different because we're a different kind of ministry than your typical preaching, teaching type content that you get at a lot of places. But check it all out, daily devotional, written it every day for 20 years. If you don't get it, there's a place to sign up to get in your email under the resource tab. TV program, welcome to all of our friends, not only watching here in the United States, but a growing number of people picking us up in countries outside the U.S. And we are kind of excited that I would say 10% of the audience is watching the program outside the United States. But of course, we're here live every Monday through Friday from 11 p.m. to midnight Eastern time. But of course, on our Facebook, Twitter, YouTube pages, we archive all of the programs for on-demand viewing. And again, on our homepage, if you click on the media link, Live Prayer Television, you will find the links to those various pages where you can find all of our programming for on-demand viewing. Let's have a quick word of prayer and get going. Father, thank you for tonight. Thank you for bringing us together. Lord, I pray tonight that we hear from you and that you open our hearts and minds to hear the things that you want us to know tonight. I know every one of us comes to this program tonight with our own needs and issues. And I pray tonight, Lord, and stand in the gap for my friends, whatever those needs and issues may be. God, I pray that you will meet them for the glory of God. Meet those needs. We thank you for the blessings, Lord, that you bestow upon us each and every day, so many that we take for granted. So we give you this time now. Speak to us, Lord. Let us hear you clearly tonight. And we thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. All right, let's get going. I'm going to start with the Supreme Court. And one of the questions I get a lot of in emails is, it sounds like you get off into the political a lot. And again, for this short season that we're part of this world, the institution of politics is what governs man. And it pretty much has almost from day one, really, if you look back. But and it is an important aspect of our life in this life, because so much of what the government does affects our lives. We happen to be blessed, if you live in the United States, to live in the most free nation ever, but there's always tensions on those freedoms. And of course, so much of what we deal with in our daily lives in the spiritual world translate also into the political world. Obviously things like sinful vices, like sexual perversions and gambling, things like that. The marriage issue, life, obviously. Lots of things that translate from our faith beliefs, and they also have a political element to it. So we need to talk about that. And one of the things I've been trying to help you understand is, by the grace of God and by God's hand, Donald Trump became the president in 2016. We know that God raises men to power and takes men out of power, at least until January of 2021. He'll be the president, and we'll see what happens in November of next year, whether he will get another 4 years. But in the meantime, one of the things I've been trying to point out is the amount of motivation, I think is a good word, on the part of Christians, because for 8 years we had an administration that quite honestly was not Christian-like. They were not sympathetic to religious liberties, and they obviously took an absolute they stood in absolute opposition to God on those social issues of the day, like marriage and life and those issues. And I've been really excited to see Christians taking advantage of the time we have with this president, with an administration that is I don't think it's a stretch to say pro-Christian, and at least is giving the Christian community some encouragement to really press forward. Like I said, this whole abortion issue, let me find that real quick. Where is it? I will find it, but I'll find it here somewhere. But the fact is, there's a lot of polling out that abortion is seen as one of the top issues. But the amazing thing is, in reading some of the summary pages that kind of give you an idea of how, what kind of sampling they had, how they came to these numbers and everything. The margin of error, which is usually in a good poll, +3, -3, right? In abortion, they say that you really have got to use a margin of error of +10, -10, because so many people, especially pro-life people, don't want to go on the record about this issue. But, and of course, we've got 2 Supreme Court justices that has really, juiced up the pro-life movement, and and we're seeing a lot of things. All right, so let me hit you on a few things to start with. The Bladensburg Cross, that was a case the Supreme Court agreed to hear. It was a cross in Maryland. It's on public land. It's 40 feet high. It's visible, from the main thoroughfare that heads into D.C. So it's a very public monument, and it was erected almost 100 years ago. It was really a war memorial to World War I heroes. So I mean, this cross has been there, and of course, because it's on public land, you had the God haters, the atheists, pushing their agenda to basically just strip God out of everything in public life. But the Supreme Court, in a solid ruling, agreed that cross can remain. So the Bladensburg Cross in Maryland, that 40-foot cross, is not coming down. And also some of the cases that the court didn't even hear are cases such as taking in God we trust out of the money. Okay, they aren't even hearing that, and so the previous court ruling stands. And again, this has been a target of the atheists for decades. I remember writing a devotional on this 15, 18 years ago, when some guy named Michael Newdow first tried to take under God out of the pledge, in God we trust off the money, and he's still around, but in God we trust isn't going anywhere. Also, they refused to hear a case against a Christian baker, which means that the lower court ruling stands, which exonerated the Christian baker from having to violate his faith beliefs. And I'm just telling you, we have an atmosphere now, and a lot of it has been set by the president, by his public rhetoric, his actions, has created an environment where Christians are finally getting aggressive in pushing a Christian agenda. Listen, if atheists can push their godless agenda, why on earth can't Christians push a God agenda? I'm serious. We've pretty much just gone off into our little corners, hide behind our 4 walls, and we just really haven't fought the culture on the issues that we say we believe in. And I learned something a long time ago, and it's simply this: if you really believe it, you'll live it. And while I don't ever give credit to Satan for anything, I've never been shy about saying that, in a way, I do admire at least his minions, because they're tireless. We go to sleep, they keep working. We give up, they keep working. And this is one of the few times, I got to be honest with you, in a long time, since really the culture has really shifted against a Christian worldview, that Christians are starting to rise up, and it's very welcome. It's very invigorating. Welcome to the war. There's some of us, like myself, we've been on those front lines for 20 years now. So thank you for getting in the trenches and joining forces. To that end, one of the issues that is kind of left behind in the whole immigration, like I said, I'm going to be bouncing here a little bit, so just hang with me tonight, okay? One of the issues that gets left behind a lot in the immigration fight, and we try to mention it. We mention about what? criminals coming across the border, right? The health issues, the incredible expense to the country, because the majority of these people, we're going to be housing them, feeding them, educating them, health care, right? I mean, so we've got a whole plethora of issues. One issue that doesn't get enough attention that I've been trying to, isolate every now and then, because I don't want to leave this out, is the fact that a lot of these people they're not coming from Guatemala or El Salvador or Mexico. I was telling you, they've been stopping tons of people from African countries. Some of them from the Congo, where they've got this whole Ebola breakout again. And some of them are coming from, guess where? The Middle East. I told you last night about a 20-year-old young man from Syria in the Pittsburgh area that the FBI, by the grace of God and by their wonderful efforts, thwarted this young man from going in and demolishing a Christian church during service on Sunday. That was the plan. Well, it turns out this Syrian kid, he got in the country coming across the southern border. And all I'm saying to you is, how many more out there? How many more? If you remember last night, I shared a great analogy with you. There was a $1 billion cocaine bust in Philadelphia earlier this week. $1 billion. But if you remember last night's program, I took the time to explain to you that drug traffickers, for every 10 pounds, let's just call it pound, 10 pounds, 10 containers, 10 whatever of drugs, right? They factor in the fact that 4 of them are going to get stopped, 3 to 4, somewhere in that neighborhood. They know they're going to lose 30 to 40% of their shipments. Those shipments are going to get caught up by law enforcement. They understand that. They still do it because guess what? The 6 that get through make them incredibly wealthy. Well, it's the same issue with the border. And I've been reading more and more lately, because we always hear about the 300, the 4,500 last week, the 2,000 yesterday that got stopped at the border. But what people are not taking into account is if they're catching 2,000, and again, I think it's an absolutely ridiculous number, but let's just say it's 50-50. If I had to guess, I'd probably say it's probably along the drug lines, 60 to 70% that gets through. But let's just say it's 50-50. So if they're capturing 4,000 people at the border a day, let's just say, use that number. That means they got 4,000 people that aren't getting captured that are in our country from who knows where. This is a financial issue, a health issue, a safety issue, a national security issue. And it's just amazing to watch people playing politics with something because you know what's funny? I remember even back during the Obama administration, I remember doing TV shows back in 13 or 14 when the border was an issue. It's been an issue for a long time. And I remember writing in devotionals and talking on this TV program about the very fact that one of these days we're going to have some sort of a terror event in this country, and they're going to find out that the people came in through the southern border. Because we've already had, thousands of people captured from Africa, from the Middle East. Don't just assume they're all coming from, Central America or Mexico. I mean, that's the largest percentage of them, but they're coming from all over the world. And what a better place for a terrorist to slip in the country? Well, the Syrian kid that they thankfully caught in Pittsburgh the other day, who had plotted to basically walk into a church on Sunday morning, a Christian church, and kill everybody. He came into the country through the southern border. This isn't, this isn't hyperbole. This isn't, some political fear mongering. This is reality. It just amazes me that in light of the incredible issues that are at play, it's become so political, nobody will do anything. Planned Parenthood, big announcement tomorrow on the one Planned Parenthood clinic in Missouri that's still open. Apparently they're supposed to rule on that being shut down. And the doctors, I'll be shocked if the judge doesn't allow them to shut it down, because the doctors, they're just defying the Missouri Health Board and their requirements. I mean, the state has every right to enact standards. That's what the each state has like a health department for, and it just amazes me watching these people on cable news. Now, I understand when they get that Wynn woman, the new president of Planned Parenthood, when they get people like that, people from these baby killing advocacy groups like NARAL, Emily's List, when they get people like that, I understand them, advocating and promoting and making a case for their business, killing babies. But you've got the host of these programs. This Rachel Maddow on MSNBC, she goes like berserk at the thought that Missouri might not have an abortion clinic. The horror. And she even described it as a horror, these archaic abortion restriction laws. She called them nightmares. No, Rachel, the nightmare is the poor baby that did nothing, that's being slaughtered. Unbelievable. Pray about Iran, please. We've got obviously a real issue there. We've had an issue. Listen, we've had an issue in Iran, for 40 years, going back to when they kicked out the Shah, overran our embassy, took, I can't remember the number now, what was it, 40-some Americans hostage. And we had day one, day two, went all the way through. And they let the hostages go 5 minutes before Reagan was, he went through, Reagan beat Carter. And then on the day that Reagan took office, an hour before he was sworn in, inaugurated, they let the hostages. But we've been dealing with Iran for 40 years. They're no good. I pray one day maybe it'll come out. I have no idea why Obama pushed for that Iran deal. It was the most stupid deal in the world. Number one, we had frozen, $150 billion or so back from the 70s. And as part of the deal, he gave their money back. Now, you've got people who have legitimate lawsuits against Iran, and that money should have just stayed in escrow, depending on those, because how are those people ever going to collect? But he couldn't wait to give them that $150 billion, and he gave them $1.5 billion in cash. I remember watching those skids lined up on the runway. And where do you think that money went? Iran is the #1 state sponsor of terror in the world. They fund Hamas and Hezbollah that's, always going after Israel. We know what their plan is for Israel. They want Israel wiped off the face of the earth. They don't even mince words. Death to America. And this stupid nuclear deal, the reason it was so insane was the international, the IAEA, the International Atomic Inspectors, they could not inspect any of the military sites in Iran. They were off limits. Well, if I'm Iran and I'm still, cooking my nukes, I just make sure everything's being done on my military sites because nobody can inspect the military sites. Unbelievable. But, they shot down a drone. Another thing that's really bothered me, and this is a purely political observation, just for the record, I have no idea, how John Kerry is continuing to have his, he's continued to talk to these people in Iran, basically telling them, we're going to get rid of Trump in 2020, so just hang on and we'll get this deal. But there are laws, the one specifically, it's called the Logan Act, which means civilians can't be negotiating foreign policy outside of the government, which is, I get it. He's an ex-secretary of state. I understand that. So that puts him in a little different category. But still, if this is what he's doing, trying to sabotage current administration foreign policy, it's definitely a Logan Act violation. You might be getting on the verge of treason, especially now that they're shooting down our drones and things. But be praying for that situation. I think there's going to be some restraint. That's what I feel. Obviously, the financial pressure that the Trump administration has put on Iran has been intense. And again, the whole reason for that is to get them to the negotiating table to negotiate a real deal. Because again, not only did this stupid Iran deal, first of all, the reason Trump was able to tear it up is because it never was a treaty. See, a treaty has to be ratified by Congress. Well, Obama knew darn well he didn't have the vote. His own party wasn't going to support it. So he had no way of actually making that any kind of an official treaty with the United States because he had no way to get so just basically a piece of paper that Trump tore up. But the point being, on top of not being able to inspect the military sites, it also included the fact that there was no performance guarantees in the treaty. And by that I mean there was nothing to prevent them from doing what they have always done, which is sponsor terror groups. Just insane. So my gut is I think it's going to be, I think there'll be some warnings. We'll see what happens. They're definitely trying to provoke the United States into some sort of action. But we will see what it goes. But be praying about that because that is a very serious situation that's going on right now. Let's see where I want to go. Let me go back here. Let me talk big tech again just for a second. I'm just going to hit this real quick. I know last night when I was talking to you about the big picture and trying to explain a little bit why I'm dealing with this whole issue of big tech, because it is, whether you realize that, such a serious part of our culture now, of our lives, how we communicate, how we get information out to the masses. Okay, it's with us, whether you like it or not. It's there. It's a vehicle, a big vehicle. And one of the things that I hit last time, I hit again, is as they have come under a lot of scrutiny now. You're seeing, the mafia. They had this. In the mafia there was a word omerta. It was It was the code of silence. They didn't rat on each other, right? And of course, probably the first real mafia rat was Valachi, the Valachi papers. Remember that? Of course, then you had Sammy the Bull, who brought down Gotti. And again, a lot of the real turning of mobsters on each other, which never used to happen. Before, back in the day, I'm talking pre-70s, late 70s, late 70s, maybe early 80s, I guess. Before that, it was usually pretty adhered to, because listen, most of this stuff, they get a 6-year, a 10-year deal in a state facility. They do maybe a third of it. In the meantime, their family's getting taken care of. They're getting special treatment inside, everything. So, you just did your time, and then, that was part of the deal. Well, what happened in the late 70s, early 80s, and this was when Giuliani was kind of the U.S. attorney in charge of the mob cases, they passed the RICO statutes, which basically is a racketeering charge. And with the RICO statutes, number one, they could put a heck of a lot of years in prison on people charged under that statute. Plus, probably just as important, it allowed the government to basically take everything. In other words, if they got you on a RICO statute, for gambling, let's say you're running a book, right? And they use the RICO statute on it, right? Well, instead of maybe a 2-year state gambling beef, you might be looking at a 10 or 12-year federal beef, okay, where you're going to do pretty much the whole time. Plus, again, just as critical, they could take everything you owned. I mean, let's say you've got a couple houses, a few condos, you got some cars, you got a boat, you got bank accounts, you got stuff. They can take it all. And it was really at that point that they started to be able to, flip these mob guys. And I'm only taking a minute to explain that, because this is kind of what's happening in the big tech world. Now that the layers of the onion are starting to be peeled back, we're seeing some lawsuits against these companies. They've got some people that, are whistleblowers. We're starting to, kind of get a lot better and clearer understanding of how these big tech companies are being run. It's pretty, really, it's pretty alarming. Lots of hours, lots demanded. A lot of people literally sleep in their office. A lot of drug use, a lot of sex going on. These places don't seem to be your best corporate work environment, okay? Let me just put it that way. And of course, the reason we're talking about it is because it's also become crystal clear there is some very real and acted upon biases within these companies. They're all based out in California, pretty much, Silicon Valley. You've got pretty much people with no faith, they all obviously have this, techie, skill set, upbringing, mindset, whatever, right? And it's like these companies are their property that they let you use, but if you're not using it in a way they agree with, they're going to kick you out of the sandbox. That's probably a pretty good way to put it. So we've got that going on with the big tech companies. And again, you've got these companies are such an important element in regards to getting information out in today's world. That's why I spend the time talking about it, trying to explain these things to you, because again, their primary issue seems to be, it's really two things. It's their political ideology, which really is nothing but an extension of their view of life. And their view of life does not include the Bible and God and Jesus and all of that. That's not part of their worldview. They have a worldview which is, for the most part, faithless. They've grown up as part of the godless culture. And I'm not saying they're bad people. It's just not part of it. So they look at life a whole lot different than, say, somebody that grew up in the church. As far as their beliefs, as far as what they believe right and wrong is, as far as a lot of things. So when you've got the collective of these companies that, carry this type of belief set, and now you've got a lot of contention going back and forth, it becomes an issue for Christians because, again, Christian speech, a Christian message, is one that ultimately they would like to see just shut down. And that's just reality. Okay? And they're doing it in a lot of ways. Primarily, they're doing it the same way the mainstream media does it, and they're doing it the way the culture is, and that's by basically labeling Christian beliefs as hateful beliefs. In other words, if you oppose people who choose to engage in perverted sex with people of the same sex, you're a hate monger. If you challenge some poor boy that thinks he's a girl, if you challenge that in any way, you're a hater. If you don't believe that two men should be married, you're a hater. If you don't believe a woman should be able to go and kill her baby at any point in time, you're a hater. You see? And again, the reason this is an issue is because these social media, big tech companies are part of our cultural infrastructure now. And they are significant ways that people take in information. So if they're not having access to, let's say, a Christian viewpoint of life, they don't go to church. They're not being exposed to a Christian belief, say, in the social media world. The media has all but shut down that type of a belief set. You follow what I'm saying? In other words, it's getting harder and harder to get a message, a Christian message, a biblically based message into the culture. And the fact is, Christians had nobody to blame but themselves. They abandoned the culture. They left the culture. They ran to that nice, safe, happy, little subculture where all the Christians just hang out together and happy, and everybody loves each other. And oh, by the way, people can make a lot of money there because they're basically trading dollars with other Christians. So now one of our prime commandments by God Himself to take the gospel into the world. We better focus on taking the gospel into this country. So, and again, a lot of these things haven't gone to a critical point yet. But anybody who's read my devotionals, especially if you've been around for a while, 20 years, we've been on 20 years. If you've been around for, say, 10 of those years, if you watch this program, say, if you go back as far as, say, 10 years ago, okay, you know what I'm talking about, because so many of the things I was telling you 10 years ago, that if we don't deal with it, it's going to happen. They all happen, every one of them, I hate to say. And while we still have, while we still are able to get that message out through these various vehicles, though it gets tougher every day, there's coming a day when that won't be possible. And that's why I'm hitting this so hard, because we've got to take advantage of the day. We've got to be aggressive. We can't be passive. By the way, you know what? I'm going to stay off of that. Let me stay off of that. I want to get to this reparations thing in a second. Let me just hit that real quick. Again, 61, grew up during, I was, grew up during the civil rights movement. 1972, I was in the very first wave of forced busing, taking me out of the, white suburb I lived in and took me to an inner city high school that was 90-some% black. No problem for me. I grew up believing from pretty much as long as I can remember, all men are created equal. I never had an issue with any of this. But this comes up every now and then. Of course, it's talking about some sort of payment for the slave days and everything. Very divisive issue. I don't want to sit here and get into any kind of a real debate, although it was in Congress yesterday, and they had this bishop on, Episcopal, of course, and basically saying that if white people don't pay reparations, their soul is damned to hell. Now, this is a quote unquote bishop that's all for open borders, supports killing babies, supports perverting God's holy institution, marriage, and they had some other people, very articulate black men and one woman, that made compelling cases why this whole issue is ridiculous. And they made compelling cases that so much has changed, even in my lifetime, in terms of opportunities. I mean, my goodness, you would not know it watching, race baiting, faux reverends like Jackson or Sharpton, who basically have made a living preaching a victimology. And listen, I'm not going to sit here and deny that there's issues and everything. That's right. But I'll tell you the biggest problem. You want to know the biggest problem? I can tell you right away. The government in the mid-'60s came out with this whole welfare program that has destroyed the black race for the most part. I'm dead serious. Before the 60s, the black family was tight, Christian, hardworking. It was in the 60s that became economically advantageous not to get married. So you started having the out of wedlock stuff. Then of course the drug culture kicked in. Then you started to see the breakdown of the family. What have I always told you on this program? I don't care whether it's white families, black families, Hispanic families, Asian families. When the family breaks down, the culture breaks down. Right? I mean, blacks represent 14% of the population, 40% of the abortions. And that's because you've got exactly what just to be honest, the Democrats planned a permanent underclass. The welfare state that came out of the 60s has done more to destroy black America than anything else you can imagine. Because it led to the breakdown of the family. It led to the breakdown of marriage. And I don't care, like I said, whether you're black, white, Hispanic, Asian, purple or pink. When marriage and the family break down, the culture breaks down. That's exactly what's happened. But despite that, there's a large percentage, a growing percentage, of black Americans that have really taken advantage of the opportunities in this country. So it always becomes a very divisive issue because you've got so many divisive people out there that profit off keeping it divisive. But first year I started preaching, probably 80% of the churches I preached in were all over the south side of Chicago and the west side of Chicago, Gary, Indiana, up in the northwest Indiana. I don't care, because at the end of the day, God doesn't care if you got black skin, white skin, green skin. He cares about your relationship with Jesus. And when that breaks down, and when the family breaks down, marriage breaks down, the culture breaks down. It's inevitable. Amazing, last night I told you that Joe Biden was done. Well, amazingly, you've got the mainstream press now coming after his kid for everything. I guess Joe got his kid some kind of sweetheart $1 billion deal out of China, out of the Ukraine. That's being talked about. I mean, it was kind of inevitable. I mean, it was kind of easy to see. If they don't want you, they know how to destroy you. And Joe's been around a long time, and they've got tape of him now, calling Jesse Jackson racially insensitive names, and they, again, I've always told you, the institution of politics is an evil, evil, evil world. But Madonna, poor dear, says Jesus supports abortion. That is not true. Taylor Swift, another poor dear. Notice these entertainers, they're just void. They're just void. I had been called a hate monger or a bigot or anything like that. I'd be doing this program on a 50-foot high mountain of dollar bills. More and more parents are going after schools. Parents, you got to be aware of what's going on, because a lot of these schools, they're pushing this whole insane transgendered stuff on 6, 7, 8-year-old kids, making them question what gender they are. I mean, it's insane. I'm very shocked some of these schools don't get. I mean, a lot of parents are taking their kids out of school. You can't blame them. You can't blame them. Israel Follot. That's his name. I was trying to think of the gentleman's last name. Israel Follot. Easy to remember his first name. Last name's Follot. He's the world's top rugby player. I mentioned him a couple weeks ago. His $4 million contract, rugby is, of course, primarily an Australian sport, at least at the professional level. You get some of it in Europe, but primarily Australia. That's where the hotbed of rugby is. He was top world. They voided his contract because of comments he made about people who choose to engage in perverted same-sex relations. He's a hardcore Christian. He was given several chances to basically walk back his statements. He said, it's not what he says, it's what God says. And I got to be honest with you, you got a lot of athletes in the United States that claim to be Christians, and they probably are. I mean, only God knows their heart. But when they're forced to take a stand, they're nowhere to be found. One of the few guys out there, and he's at the end of his career, is Ben Watson. Played with the Ravens in Baltimore, played with the New Orleans Saints. He actually retired, came out of retirement. I guess he's going to play with the New England Patriots for one more year. But Ben is hardcore pro-life, preaches that marriage, family message I was just talking about. A solid Christian, doesn't back down, speaks out loudly about abortion, especially in the black community. He's one of the few professional athletes that has no problem taking their stand for Christ. Of course, you got Tebow, of course, but there's not many. It's really a shame too, and there's not many anywhere in the world. But this Israel Folau guy, a lot of credit to this guy, really. Oh, measles, 28 states now, largest outbreak in over 30 years. Of course, that's all border related. And let me leave you with this tonight. And I'm saving the lesson from Trump until tomorrow because I need some time because I've got a whole laundry list. I just kind of asking God, keep the news down tomorrow because there's just so much stuff. I don't want to get too far behind. But we'll pick up the Trump stuff tomorrow. That's something that doesn't have to be done immediately, but I do want to get it in. Hopefully tomorrow I will. But before I leave you tonight, let me share this one with you. A Tennessee driver just got hit with 3 counts of murder. He was driving recklessly and had an accident with another car in which a 2-year-old child was killed. The mother was killed, and the mother had a baby in the womb that was killed. And Tennessee is one of the states with what they call fetal homicide laws. So he got charged for the death of the 2-year-old, the death of the mother, and the death of the baby in the womb. Yeah. So I bring that out for all these people. Well, it's not a baby till it's born. It's a fetus. It's not a baby. Give me a break. Then why are these states charging people with murder when the fetus is still in the womb? Anyway. All right, listen. Good night. Boy, that was quick tonight. Woo, that was really fast. Before we leave tonight, if you've never made a decision for Christ, I want to give you that opportunity right now. It's a choice only you can make. But, we talk so much about the culture in this world. But as we all know, this world will one day be gone. And for each of us, we will at some point take our last breath. And we will be leaving this brief journey bound by time and space. And we will be off into an eternal state. Either with God our Creator or without God our Creator. That's a choice only you can make. But He gave Jesus as a sacrifice so that if you would come to know His Son by faith, your sins would be forgiven and you would be with Him forever. If you want to make that decision, pray with me now. Dear Lord, I come to you tonight a sinner, asking, Lord, for you to forgive me my sins. Tonight, I believe in my heart, and tonight I confess with my mouth that Jesus Christ is my Lord and my Savior and my Redeemer. Thank you for saving me, Jesus. From this day forward, my life belongs to you. And it's in Jesus' name I pray. Amen. If you prayed, if you meant it, the Bible says you're saved, not because you said a few words, but because of your faith. Got a book I'll send you, won't cost you anything. All you have to do is drop me a quick email, bkeller@liveprayer.com, bkeller@liveprayer.com, and I'll get it right out to you. I'll even pay the postage. And if you need prayer for anything, please don't hesitate to drop me an email, bkeller@liveprayer.com. Okay? Love and care about you. Pray you have a great night tonight. And I can't believe tomorrow's Friday. Lord willing, we'll see you back here in 23 short hours. God bless.
What problems are you dealing with in your life right now?
Do you feel like giving up? Times are hard and you're not strong. Well, I know the answer for you. And